Welcome to another presentation from House of David Fellowship in Richmond, Virginia. I'm Lee Miller. Today we're going to venture slightly off course from some of the things that we regularly do. Today's focus is going to be more about the Unification Initiative. Recently in a meeting it was brought to my attention that pretty much all of my focus is on helping those people who are part of assemblies on a worldwide scale that are part of this body of believers. And so the question was put forth, are you going to do anything to help the leadership? And the initial answer that came to mind was no. But then after giving it some thought, there were some things that we do and things that we understand. And so it was decided that maybe we should go ahead and put something together. So after some more discussion, we decided to start that process. Now, I don't know how frequent it's going to be. There are things that could be very much subsets of what I'm doing here, but this particular presentation today is going to be more generic, and it's going to be very much focused on the leadership of assemblies, no matter where you are. All right, so what we're calling it is Protocol in the Assembly, and the reason we're doing that is because really that's just what this is. I'm going to explain some examples and give some explanations of what this is, and I'm breaking it down like I usually break things down. It's just going to be different. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing that we have to do, of course, we have to see what's on tap. All right, so when you're dealing with protocol and assembly, and this is one of those, I don't know, angels fear to tread, landmines, those types of things come to mind. I'm very hesitant about telling somebody else what they need to do. Let me just say, okay? I would rather not. And this presentation is not me telling you what you need to do. This presentation is telling you what I do and why it works. And if it works for you, then that's great. If it doesn't work for you, and it may not, then that's fine too. But at least I'm putting out there a suggestion that I think will help in the overall scheme of things of what we're trying to accomplish with the Unification Initiative. So we've got to figure out where we're going to start. Obviously, we're going to talk about the UI. There are two phrases that I want to bring to your attention that I have a tendency to use a lot. And I really need to define them. So why not start with the first presentation on UI and define them there? So we'll take a look at them. You would think in a presentation like this, it would be like, well, everything you presented goes without saying. And that's been my position all along. Nevertheless, here we are, and I'm saying it. So I'm going to actually talk about having conflict and handle it with either building up or tearing down. I'm going to give a couple of examples. The heuristic principle. Can't really talk about UI and getting along without that. Example of what not to do. I always have fun with these things. My presentations, they in the process of creating them, I have a lot of stuff that I put in that disappears later on down the road. So, but this one didn't go away. Example of what not to do. So I'm going to share it, see what you think. Suggestion of what could be done in a conflict situation. And then finally, we will wrap it up with being a restaurant manager. I know that makes a lot of sense. But that's how we do things here. All right, so where do we start? I'm going to start with some scriptures, and I'm going to ask you, what do these mean? Here's the first one. Let all things be done decently and in order. How much study does it take for us to figure out what this means? 1 Corinthians 14:40 for the inquiring minds in the room. Next verse. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men. It's in Romans. And the third one. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be set apart. That's in Hebrews. Anybody see a pattern here? I'm going for, is there a way we can get along? That's where I'm going. All right, next up, the UI. We have become PhD candidates on finding ways to divide. We are very skilled at this. So, let's turn it upside down. Can we find a way to not divide over some issue? Just a question. Now, another verse. What does this verse mean? If you see the donkey of someone who hates you lying helpless under its load, you must not ignore him, but be sure to help him with it. That's in Exodus 23. What does that mean? Well, you know, my neighbor doesn't think a whole lot of me. As a matter of fact, they're a backbiter and they do other things that I don't appreciate. Oh man, look, that donkey just fell under its load. There ain't no way I'm going over there. Really? Really? I wonder if our biggest problem is lack of knowledge. Now, I sometimes find myself in conversations in other assemblies around the country, and they'll talk about some texts that I will admit are challenging. They're not clear. Perhaps they could be interpreted more than one or two ways. Some of those texts exist. I'll be first in line to say. But you know what? I'm not sure that's what we need to be concerned about. For me, I find that there's a number of scriptures that are quite clear. And my concern is whether or not, when crunch time arrives, what do I do? Now listen, I'm with the rest of you guys. If there's something I don't understand, I'm going to dig through it. I'm going to get help, the assembly, elders, other leaders in the nation. Fine, we all do the same thing. We're all in the same boat. We don't understand everything. We proceed to study. We try to figure it out. Nevertheless, when the time comes to test what we know, what does that look like? It looks like the phone call. An elder, a leader of an assembly, was talking with another leader of assembly. The wife was sitting there. This was not on speakerphone, but it was clear from half of the conversation that this conversation was not going well. So, when the phone call came to an end, the elder leader said, I am not happy right now. That's fair. You can say that. It's legal. Okay? So the wife says, so, what are you going to do? Hold a grudge? All right, so this next section is a tangent for you people who are married, especially you husbands. Sometimes don't you just love your wives? All right, moving on. Two phrases. The first one, I coined this phrase in 2005. Yeshuic Judaism. The reason I coined it is because I was trying to figure out something. In the first century, there was something known as Judaism. In this century, there's something known as Rabbinic Judaism. There's probably some other flavors. Is Karaite Judaism? Is that an official title? I'm not sure. Could be. I know in looking at some of the things that were taking place in the first century, that Judaism did not really follow the ancient ways that were established. There was some twists and turns in the road. And it seemed like, to some degree, there was a, could I say, Reformation statement being made by Yeshua to try to get some things back on course. So I was frustrated, could not find something, so I said, you know what? What we're shooting for is Yeshuic Judaism. And people were like, what's that? So then that got started, the Feast of Tabernacles. So I'm using it to explain my understanding of those areas that Yeshua wanted us to make adjustments in the first century to come back closer to what the Father originally intended. That's what I'm going for. So if you hear that phrase, that's what I mean. The second phrase is published in a public forum. Once again, goes without saying, but let's just review these words in English. If you have studied something and you have written down your notes and etc., and then after you finish it, you got your conclusion, then the question that I have is, have you published it in a public forum? And the reason why is because you need to understand Yeshuic Judaism is an adversarial system of understanding the truth of God. Now, this is what I mean by that. Something just popped up on my screen. This is what I mean by that. Proverbs 18:17 says, the first to present their case seems correct until the second comes along and examines it. And that's what we're supposed to do. That's why I don't sit here and tell you that I'm going to teach you what the truth is. I am going to sit here and tell you that I studied the subject. I found some stuff. I'm going to collate it, put it in some type of order, and I'm going to present it to you. And then your responsibility is to get out your red pen, because it's not about me being right. It's about us working together to uncover the better understanding of the written revelation so we can walk it out. That's what it's about. So when I say published in a public forum, and I will say that probably later in this presentation, I mean, have you studied something and made it available to other people to fulfill that particular Proverbs 18:17 suggestion? Now, there was a time 20 years ago when trying to put something on the web was costly. Today, it costs nothing to put something on the web. So, finances are not the primary reason why somebody would not have something published in a public forum. Now, on the downside of using that phrase, when I have used it before, most people become offended. And we're going to talk about that later too. But anyway, these are the two phrases I wanted to make sure that you understood what I meant. If you've done a study, whether I've done the study or whether I have not, and I'm looking to you to give me guidance, I need to have it published in a public forum so that I can access it, so that I can read it and look into it. Check your resources and your sources and follow up on your footnotes and etc. That's what I need. Because if I have no access to your research and study, it does me no good. All right, so this is the phrase I'll use to mean that. Okay, building up versus tearing down. I'm going to give you an example of something that happened in assembly last year. Of course, when I was informed of it happening, it had already happened, and that whole meeting was way over, and I was not able to react poorly. Okay? Versus if it had been told to me right when it happened, I could have reacted poorly right on the spot. But unfortunately, I was informed of this later, and so I did not have that opportunity to react poorly. Okay, but anyway, this example is somebody came into this assembly, they were a guest, and in this time period, it took place right before this presentation, which is our snack fellowship time period. They were talking to different people, and that's what we do here. And now I wasn't present for this, so this is third or fourth hand. So in the process of that fellowship, they shared something about a book that they were reading. And the other person that was there with them said, yes, I'm reading the same book. So this guest said, really? Well, let me tell you, that book is a piece of colorful metaphor. Okay, so I have a problem with that. Now, let's put me in the place. I'm an assembly leader. I go to another assembly. I'm hanging out during the fellowship time. I see somebody reading a book that I've read that I think is really not good. What am I going to do? Let me tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go to that person and say, you know what, that book is a piece of fill in the blank. That's what I'm not going to do. Because there's a chain of command and a authority structure. So if the leader of that assembly has suggested that his people read that book for some reason, whatever that reason is, if the leader has said that, if I'm going to have any issue at all, it's going to be taken up with the leader. And even then, I'm not going to go to the leader and say, are you an idiot? I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, so, I see you have your people reading this book. Did you read it? Yeah, I read it. What did you think? Well, I thought A, B, C, D, and E. And then I'm going to say, where do we go from here? Okay? But even if I have some problems with that book, and look, let me be truthful. I have problems with every book. I have problems with every journal article. I have problems with every Bible study. I got problems with the KJV. I mean, listen, I got problems. I know this. But sometimes somebody says something pretty good. And maybe that's what they're after. So, benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to chew out that leader, rip him up one side, down the other. I'm just going to inquire. If they turn to me and say, are you familiar with this book? And I say, yes, actually I did read it. Well, what do you think? If they get that far, that doesn't happen often, but if they do, now I can share 1% of what I really think about that book. Not to offend. Okay? So, I'm not the know-it-all. I don't have the plaque in front of me that says truth stops here. I have my perspective, good or bad. Hey, we all have the same thing. We have a perspective, it's good, it's bad. So, I think that guest should not have disparaged the book to these people. If they had a problem, I think they should go to the leadership. So, let me ask a question. You're the leader. You've asked some people to read a little book. Do you want guests coming in and doing that same thing, ripping up that book in the metaphorical manner that they would do it? You've suggested it because you're the leader of that assembly. You've suggested that book to be read. Do you want people coming in and telling your people that they're idiots because they're reading this book? I suggest you don't. That's not how you would want it to be. If there's going to be a problem, you would like for them to take it up with you. Not tell everybody in your assembly that they've lost their mind. I don't support that. So in all of these cases, it's Leviticus 19:18 and Yeshua's statement, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So, if I were a leader, I would not want people coming in and doing that to the people that are in this assembly. And if I go into another assembly, not as anybody, I'm just me, and I go in, I'm not going to do it either, because I just don't think it's right. Okay? Next. Building up technique. Instead of disparaging that book, perhaps I could say, I've got some problems with some of the things the author says. I've got some problems. I've followed up with his notes, and I've looked up some of the journal articles that he referenced, and I got some problems. But I'll tell you what, over here in this chapter, he nails some things. And I came away with now, wow, that's some good insight. So the worst book could have something correct. And by taking that position, I did not tear down that leader. I built up the leader. I gave an honest answer. Now, there's a few people. I have that special relationship called raw. And when I give them one of these 1% answers, they'll go, stop. Give me the raw answer. Okay, that's a different story. 99% of the people do not want the raw answer. Okay? And I won't give it unless it's asked for. I give the 1% answer because I would rather not tear down. I would rather build up. Like they say, it is not my responsibility to correct everybody on Facebook. It's not my responsibility to correct everybody who writes a book. I will share. But there needs to be a level of getting along with everybody as best we can. All right, I don't want to kill that, even though I have. And I say this, in the first century, in the synagogues, there were people who believed Yeshua was the Messiah, and there were some who did not. And yet, they got along. They discussed application of Torah. They had meals together. They celebrated feasts. They went to the temple. They did sacrifices. Wow. Imagine that. All right, next point up, the Horesis principles, 1 Corinthians 11, 18, and 19. If we let all things be done decently and in order, there's no problem with differing opinions. The passage in 18:19 is that there are people in the assembly in Corinth, and they disagree about some things. And Paul says, that's great. Because, as I have said on more than one occasion, you and I do not agree on this point. Fantastic. Share with me how you got to that conclusion, because I might have missed something. Wow, novel idea. All right? There's a way to disagree and still respect authority and order. If I was to come into an assembly as a visitor and they were doing something that I thought was wrong, and the opportunity was given to me to say something about it, maybe I will. I have been in assemblies where I'm not the leader, and so I'll listen to them discussing about stuff, and then I'll go, and they'll call on me, and I'll say, I'd like to take an opposing position. And I do that early in discussions, because then ongoing, and then 5 minutes later, and eventually people say, they're looking at me, waiting for my hand to go up, and then I play games with them. But anyway, I'm just saying that there's a way to disagree and still respect authority and order. And just because I have an opposing opinion does not give me the right to crush other people. Okay? That's all I'm saying. Didn't I tell you that this goes without saying? I know, it goes without saying, doesn't it? All right, mini groups. In this particular assembly, we use mini groups, sometimes 5 to 7 groups, 5 to 7 adults and teens in those groups. That's cool. All right. The way that we have structured it here in this assembly is we have people who have a focus of a particular point. And I'm just going to give you some examples. Okay, we have ancient Near East. We have things that deal with archaeological discoveries, of course, covenant, Hebrew vocabulary, the judicial system that comes up later in Torah, relationships, textual criticism sometimes plays a role, thou shalt and thou shalt not. We need to know that. And walking this out on Tuesday, just to give some examples. And so in these smaller groups, the idea, the goal is get everybody talking. Because we read the Torah portion between the meetings. We come in, we got some thoughts, some of it we're familiar with. So then we have a way to be able to bring out a little bit deeper concept about stuff. So that's what that is about. So imagine in the first portion, Genesis 1:1 through 6:8. And I'm using this because this actually happened. So it makes a good example, all right? We'll look at 2 items that actually happened so that you can see both ways we implement this. Now, once again, I'm explaining this because I think that this is a good way to not have screaming fights and still get something done. All right, so watch. In Genesis 1:14, this is the text. God said, let there be lights in the firmament, the heavens. I put the S there because some versions have heaven as a singular, but the Hebrew is plural there, so I put the S in parentheses. To divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. And I tell you the truth. I've had some people say, wasn't it great that God used all that stuff to set up the 4 seasons? Hey, maybe that's what they were taught. So, we know what that word is. It's not that difficult. Moed is the singular. In this particular case here, it's the plural version of Moed, which is Moedim. I'll talk about it in a second. Let's talk about a more difficult problem. All right, Genesis 1:4 through 5. God saw that the light was good, and he distinguished the light from the darkness. God called the light Yom, and the darkness he called Leyil. And there was a Rev and Bokua, Echad Yom. That is verse 5. Two responses. Response number 1. Don't you know that you're not observing the Sabbath day? Oh, don't you know that you are observing the Sabbath day wrong? Yes, I got that one time, many years ago. Another response. For the record, I don't see it that way. All right, so now let's all of us take a quiz. Okay? First, which one, by its very nature, is an attack on the leadership in that assembly? First one or the second one? It's clearly the first one. Because in that, a person sitting in that group is saying to the other people in that group that you are clearly observing the Sabbath wrong. Well, they're probably following the arrangement of that assembly, so that's a judgment on the leadership. That's an attack. All right? Same questions. Number 2, which one aims to not bring division? The second one. For the record, I don't see it that way. Fine. We have to discuss this. Not bad, huh? 3, which one is the issue of a judgment? When I tell you you're doing something wrong, I have judged you, just in case we're not clear on that. 4, which one invites dialogue? You know what? I just want to let you know I don't see it that way. Oh, well, let's talk about it. That invites dialogue. Dialogue is the road to enlightenment. This is all easy. Easy stuff. 5, which one undermines trust in the leadership in that assembly? The first one. You're not observing the Sabbath correctly. So you have now judged the direction of the leadership. So you have weakened the trust that has been established between those people in that assembly and the leaders, by judging the behavior of how they interpret that commandment. I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem. And I don't think it's necessary. Okay. In the first example, which is 114, a search through the Hebrew Scriptures using this word, which is moedim, and you can also use moed, in the singular and the plural form yields pretty straightforward results. Some things are pretty easy to uncover. Relatively easy to uncover. Then there are other things. Yom is one of those things. Yom is complex because unlike moed and moedim, which has a consistent meaning throughout the Scriptures, Yom has no consistent meaning throughout the Scriptures. So if you just take verse 4 and half of 5 and build your case on what Yom means, you will be missing a whole number of other ways it's used through the text. And this is me, I think we need to use the entire revelation we've received. I know others do not. I understand that. That doesn't work for me, but I understand people do that. So, in the particular case of Yom, you need to look through a whole lot of the stuff. Now, fortunately, we did that in this assembly. So, just so you have it, here's the references. There's the first one, there's the second one, and there's the third one. Okay, so those are the 3 links that are available on YouTube that have been there for a while of what we uncovered concerning Yom, so you can actually see the teaching. Okay, so we've already done it. All right. Now, the 2 options. This is where we get into the actual protocol of the assembly itself. And this is how I see it. There was a time in this assembly when someone asked that question, and this assembly had not looked at the problem. That happened in this assembly. So, if the study's not done, this is how I see it unfolding. There's a lot of things we haven't studied. Okay? Some of them, perhaps by the assembly, could be considered more important than some others. All right? And I remember a very entertaining story by Ken Rank from Kentucky, who was telling about a church that at the time of doing the washing of the feet, okay, we know what that's talking about, that it seemed, the way the story was told, they agreed on all points, and then when it came time to wash the feet, one group of people wanted to wash the left foot first, and the other group wanted to wash the right foot first. And so they divided, and the first group became the Left Foot Baptist Church. I'm going to take the man's word that this is a true story. How sad is that? Okay, so when I say the assembly may think that certain things are more important than other things. If the Sabbath day begins at sunrise on Saturday, that's kind of important. All right, and we had some people who believed that. And at the time they believed it and were in this assembly, we had not looked at this. So so if somebody says, okay, so what are you going to do? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to talk to the elders and make sure that they see that it would be okay to go ahead and take 2 or 3 presentations and explore the subject, maybe not exhaustively, but pretty thoroughly. I'm going to invite the assembly, anybody in the assembly who would like to be a part of this study, let me know, and I will include you, okay? And then we're going to go through it. Somebody's going to be assigned to give the presentation. The study's going to be done. The time comes for the presentation. It's presented, and then it's not even over then, because after the presentation, over there's the Q&A. But at some point in time, the assembly, the eldership, the person giving the presentation, they all come to an agreement. And listen, I make mistakes all the time. I've had people come up here and say, you know, that was wrong, and that was wrong, and that was wrong, and then I have to fix it. That's what we're after. I don't care if I'm wrong. I was wrong yesterday. I'll be wrong today, and I look forward to being wrong tomorrow. I'm comfortable with wrong. I need your help to do better. All right, don't let me down. All right, so we all get together, we judge the presentation, we make the corrections, and then we publish it in a public forum. YouTube, it's free. Okay. So in this particular case, outside of this assembly, there were other people who asked me to look at this. I did look at it, and people were saying, there's no way, before I did it, because they track us, and so they were like, there's no way that you're going to solve that problem. Do you know how many years that problem's been going on? I'm like, well, you might be right, but I'm going to look, because that's what I do. I look, see what I can find. So I did look. I found, I shared, and then I posted it in a public forum. So that's what you do if you haven't studied it. What if you've done the study? Now we get into the other part. All right, now this is how I understand this. Move a few years ahead from when that event took place. We're going through that Torah portion. There's a disagreement. Somebody says, I don't see it that way. Okay, that's fine. Well, can we talk about it right now? No. Does that mean I don't want to hear what you have to say? No. It means that we've already looked at it thoroughly. The assembly has agreed that this is how we're going to walk until somebody presents additional evidence that we missed. So if you have an issue with this, and that's fine, we will not squash your voice. But if you have an issue with it, then this is the protocol in this assembly. You have to do your study. First question I'm going to say, maybe. I might say, have you already done a study on this? Now, if they say, no, but I saw a 20-minute video on YouTube, now we're going to have a problem. But we're going to pretend that's not the answer. So then I'm going to say, so, have you studied this? And they're going to go, yes, I have been looking into this for months. I'm like, so you've got some notes? Yes. Okay, so you could pull together a presentation and share it, right? At some point, I'm not rushing you. I'm not saying I need this by sunset. But could you pull something together in a few months? Yes. All right. Then the protocol in this assembly is, we've already got this figured out for now. But this is Proverbs 18:17 in real life. So, I want this person to sit down with the elders and let's go through, because they need to go through what we've already found to make sure that they're not repeating something that we already figured out and coming up with something different. So, before this comes before the assembly, We want them to bring it before the eldership so that we can peace through. Because here, here is the thing. I know this is crazy. I know you're going to say, he is crazy. We're on the same team. We are on the same team. Now, I know sometimes it doesn't appear that way. I understand that. Sometimes when I watch Law and Order, that's where I learn a lot of my how to study techniques. You got the police in the first part. You got the attorneys in the second part. And as it's nearing that middle section, the attorneys begin to show up, usually the district attorney or assistant or something like that, and the police have got some evidence stuff, and you hear them talk, and I know, I can't tell you how many times I've passed through the room, my wife's watching the show, and I go, wow, isn't it great that they are on the same team? So anyway, we're actually not enemies. I know it's shocking, but we're not. So, if you've done a study, and we can get together and look at this, then we can go through it line by line. You found this. Well, when you found that, did you find this over here? What do you think about that? And then we do that. Now, let's say that stuff is found that the original study did not uncover. Bring it before the assembly, and let's hash this out again. That's what we do. If they got nothing new, and that could happen. It's either going to be one or the two. There's only two options. They got nothing new, they got something new. That's it. Those are the two options. Nothing, something. So, if they got nothing new, we're all good. There's peace in the assembly. Nobody was bothered. They got something new, we bring it to the assembly, we share it, we rediscuss it, rehash it. There you go. Pretty simple, I think. Pretty simple. Protects the integrity of the process. Because a person who's going to give a presentation on a complex subject could very easily do 100 hours of study. Their presentation may only be 3 hours with 150 slides. That may be the length of their presentation. But do not mistake the amount of time that went into preparing the 150 slides that took 3 hours to share. If you're going to study, and by the way, that's not reading, if you're going to study, there are a lot of things that might have to be considered. So the process is protected by not bringing it before the assembly to rehash something that we don't even know what's going to go on, and it could be that nothing's changed. So I've now wasted the time of the assembly doing it that way. Therefore, I don't do it that way. I'd never want a person to feel like their voice is squashed, but if we've already looked at it and it's already established, then let's let the eldership get together with them and go through it. And then, if there's something new, you better believe we're going to bring it to the assembly. This is what I see. This is how I understand it. Okay? And that brings me to the final point of this presentation, and it's called the restaurant manager. All right, let me tell you about the restaurant manager. This particular person has some responsibilities. First, they're not the owner of the restaurant, they're just managing it. And so there's some responsibilities with managing it. In addition to managing it, they're also the lead chef. They have done chefing for a while. Their chefing is recognized on a large scale as being really excellent. So in this restaurant that only serves dinner, many times the meal that's going to be served is going to be by the restaurant manager. Okay, that's fine. There you go. Another responsibility of the restaurant manager is, I got some new people coming in. They want to be chefs. I have a responsibility to help them become chefs and to become better chefs. So a person comes in and says, okay, I'd like to create a meal for some date. I'm like, okay, that's cool. What are you going to prepare? Well, I'm going to prepare steak. I'm going, ooh, okay, tell me about how you're going to cook it. Well, I was thinking that I would fry it in a frying pan until it was hard as a rock. Oh, well, now that's going to be a problem because this is known as a great steak restaurant. And I'm not sure that is going to enhance our reputation. And as the manager, I got to look out for the owner. But listen, if you want to serve a steak meal, and you know the steak meals we serve here, because you've had them, then let's work together. Let me help you. Let me come alongside you and equip you, be in the kitchen and give you some suggestions and some thoughts. I'm not going to tell you how to make the steak, but we can talk about some seasonings. We can talk about whether the oven needs to be at this temperature or that temperature. The grill needs to be on a slant. You put the fat at the top so it drains down and blah, blah, blah. We can go through all of that, and over time and practice, that person can become a better chef. This is a responsibility of the restaurant manager. Now, as the manager for the owner of this restaurant, I have a responsibility to make sure that the food that goes on the plate that gets served to the customers is good. Because if it's not good, they're not coming back. That's bad. I need to sell good food. It needs to be good. So one of my prime objectives is going to be to make sure that meal's good. You want a chef? Come on. But in the early stages, oversight is available to you to make you a better chef. Now listen, you don't want oversight? You don't want any help? Well, that's a concern for me. Let me tell you why. Because now that chef is going to prepare a meal, and that meal is going to be served, and the people aren't going to like it. All right, so now the restaurant manager, what happens to him? One, the owner is going to be up his you-know-what. Two, his bonus is going to be low. Okay, but we'll skip over that. Three, the next time the customers see that chef's name as the one who's going to be doing the meal, they're going to say, you know what? I don't want to go there. Let's go to McDonald's. The food will be better. All right, so let's step back now. What is my responsibility? I don't want the chef to prepare a bad meal because I know what's going to happen. I got good eating people. They know what tastes good. And if this chef comes and puts this bad meal out there, okay, they got to put one bad meal. Okay, so maybe they'll get over that. But the second bad meal, and then the third bad meal, and then the fourth bad meal, and then the fifth bad meal, eventually they're going to stop coming. I have a responsibility to the owner of the restaurant not to let that happen. Therefore, I have to take a position. You get help, you don't chef anymore. It's got to be that way because I want the people to have a great dining experience. And I'm going to take measures to limit bad meals. This is what I think is my responsibility as the restaurant manager. Okay? And now you're the restaurant manager. Do you want people coming in producing bad meals? And then eventually you're going to get fired? Really? That's what you want? I don't think so. So, once again, we're working together to produce the best product for the people so that they want to be a part, to take what's there. This is a terrible analogy, but then go home and chew on it. That would be terrible if you had to chew on your meal later, but I'm just saying. Go home and chew on what you get. This is what we're after. We are, as a team, we are confrontational. This whole movement is designed to be adversarial. That's how we accomplish what God is doing, and that is fine. But we need to do it according to 1 Corinthians 14:40, which says, do everything properly and in order. Now listen, what I'm sharing, maybe your assembly is not interested in this approach, and that is fine. I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm sharing with you what somebody does, because I'm after keeping the peace. And I don't like to do things that cause people to be offended. I hate offending people. It's not that I won't. It's kind of like that story, the rabbinic story of the guy with the pillow and the feathers. And the rabbi said, go out there and shake that pillowcase until all the feathers are out. So he does it. And he says, Rabbi, what do I do now? And he says, go out there and collect all those feathers and stick it back into the pillowcase. And he says, that's impossible. And he says, that's exactly right. And it's the same thing for when you say something negative against somebody and then you have to take it back. It's impossible to take back. I can say, listen, man, I'm sorry I did that. Oh, that's okay, I forgive you. Fine and nothing. That means nothing from the damage I have caused. That means nothing because of the damage I have caused. So I don't want to do those things. You know, I can give you an example. Yesterday there was the inauguration. Sometime during the day, I don't know what time, could have been the afternoon, but the new president goes into the Oval Office, and you've seen the Oval Office, you know it ain't that big a building. I mean, it might not even be as big as this room here. So you can only get so many people in there that are news writers and photographers and all that stuff. So he's signing some, what are they called? Executive orders, I think they're called. So he's signing some stuff. And this one newspaper guy who, I didn't even recognize the name of the newspaper. But anyway, he noticed that the bust of Winston Churchill was in a certain place in the room, and that the bust of Martin Luther King, he didn't see it. He didn't see the bust. So he wrote that the bust of Winston Churchill had taken the place of the bust of Martin Luther King, and that he's now a racist, and that hit Twitter and blew up the world. And then right after that, the Secret Service agent that was standing in front of the bust of Martin Luther King stepped aside, and the guy saw the bust there. But 100 million people were on the Twitter. Now go out and collect all of those feathers again. So the guy apologized. I don't care. Too late. Means nothing to me. The damage you have caused from your era can never be recovered. I say all of that to say the other passages that were in Romans and Hebrews. When possible, live at peace with all men. Try not to cause a problem. Try not to say things that cause people to distrust the leaders that they fellowship with at their meetings, etc., etc., etc. This is what we're doing. We're building the kingdom. If you're not building the kingdom, that means you're building your kingdom, which I really don't want to be a part of. Okay? We're building the kingdom. We're not enemies. We're adversarial, but we're not enemies. Let's figure out a way to make this work. And right here is a suggestion. My final slide. When you put yourself in the place of leadership and responsibility, the path is very clear. It absolutely is. See, I feel bad for that newspaper guy. I feel bad. Because I believe that with a whole heart, he said, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. And my heart feels so bad for him. Now, here's a question. Has he learned to be very careful about how he says things? Perhaps an alternative solution. Here's my suggestion. While I was, whatever I was doing with the president and these executive orders, I noticed that the bust of, what was the guy's name? Winston Churchill is back on the desk. And as I looked around the room, I did not immediately notice the bust of Martin Luther King. The end. But no, I got to add another sentence. Really? You just had to do that so that every single news outlet would run with the story, and within 5 minutes, 100 million people worldwide saw it. You just had to do it. I'm sorry. Okay. I hope there's a lesson here to be learned. That's what I would say to him. Not that anybody cares what I have to say about it, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying. We do the same thing. We should not. We need to guard the speech. We just did James 1 and 2. Come on, people. We just did James 1 and 2. We need to guard the tongue. We need to find a way to allow the adversarial system of disagreement to work to our benefit. And I think we can do it. Now, people have told me to my face you can't do it. And I tell them, I don't believe you. Because I'm already doing it. So, we can do it if we want to do it. So, as this particular bullet says, it's the last bullet. If you put yourself, remember this is the UI to leadership, not to the people in the assembly. If you put yourself in the place of leadership and responsibility, the things that I have said today are very clear how you would want it to be handled in your assembly that the Master has put you in charge of right now. Because it's about His kingdom and not ours. So, I end this presentation by saying, none of this needed to be said. None of this needed to be said. This is just common sense. There's nothing here that's groundbreaking, the light bulb went on. There's nothing here that meets that criteria. This is all reasonable to a reasonable person. Is it really that hard? I submit it is not. And I hope that as you go through this presentation, and listen, I didn't have 100 scriptures. What did I have, 6? Maybe. I know I can think of 4. As you go through this, consider we're not enemies. It's adversarial. It's the plan. How am I going to fit in? Let's make it happen. All right? Thank you. I appreciate you being a part of this presentation. And now I will take questions. The end.